Welcome to Aspire, and I Have the Right To podcast, where we amplify voices, share stories, and drive change in the fight against sexual assault. We explore the critical issues surrounding student safety, institutional accountability, and survivor empowerment. In every episode, our goal is to provide insightful conversations with survivors, experts, educators, and advocates, giving you, our listener, valuable information, resources, and actionable steps to create safer environments and cultivate a culture of respect and consent. Welcome to another episode of Aspire, Real Men, Real Conversations. And you might sense a little bit of hesitation or pause in my normally enthusiastic intro for another podcast. The reason for that is because I think, have a very powerful discussion to be had today. And we're going to be discussing a topic that I think is a very difficult and personal one, but one that I am looking forward diving into because these conversations are so critical for us to get out there in the effort to educate, support, and hopefully help others who are going through difficult times. So on that note, I'd love to welcome Derrick Hurley to Aspire, and my co-host, Gabriel Viscogliosi. It is a cold winter day in multiple locations where we're at. We are spread out around the world. I'm in Tokyo. Gabriel is in New York. And Derrick, you are in Tennessee. Am I correct?
Correct.
So, Derrick, you are a very accomplished person, sort of setting your credentials. You are a business person. You are internationally traveled. You have had success in the working world. You have a beautiful family that you have raised. You're a father of 3 daughters, just like I am. But if I could turn it over to you just to introduce yourself and help us tee up the conversation we're about to dive into today.
Sure. Well, first of all, I spent 37 years in retail technology. Worked for a number of companies, IBM, NCR, and another probably half a dozen companies over that time. And I had a good career, and I can't complain about it. It's served us well. Um, 3 daughters, as you mentioned. In 2015, my oldest daughter, Caitlin, was in nursing school in Antigua in the Eastern Caribbean. Now, Caitlin's my oldest, and she was wanting to be a nurse. And we are a faith-based family. Actually, all my kids went to Christian school growing up. Uh, as a senior in the school they attended, they go on a mission trip at the end, kind of a reward plus, let's see what a mission trip's all about. I was fortunate to get to go with 2 of my daughters on their trips as a chaperone, but it really changed Caitlin's perspective on what she wanted to do nursing. Now, Caitlin was extremely faithful, did a lot of service projects around throughout high school, and she wanted to do travel nursing and go to remote places where there's more poverty. And in between being a travel nurse, you get a longer break potentially. I guess you can choose your assignments. She wanted to do missionary nursing so she could go and do that part from a faith base and be like a missionary nurse. So that's why she was there. And just to be clear, it was Macedonia School of Nursing. It is not a U.S. fancy school in the Caribbean. It is in the Caribbean. It is not a fancy school. It was an Antiguan school. And um, with that, it was just rustic. I'll just say it that way. That's the word I like to use. Um, and so it was nothing other than the whole reason she was there, just to set this up, was I was worried if she could deal with living out of the U.S. with the comforts we have in the U.S. for an extended period of time. And so we found a U.S. accredited school. So if it didn't work out, she could come back just like she was going to school here, take the NCLEX here, and nurse here. But it was kind of a test, right? You're going to be in different culture because it's quite a different culture in Antigua. They have power issues, water issues. tropical storms, hurricanes, all of that there. So if you can live down there, it might not be the worst place in the world, but it's a poor, all these islands, if they're unless they're UK or US or Dutch based, they're nice and around the water, but the interior of the ones that are not owned by those countries or colonized still from those countries, it's poor. It's a poor island. The people are great, but it's poor. So this is why they have some of the challenges, but this is also what we wanted for her. I thought I would feel a lot more comfortable if she decided to go to Africa or somewhere in South America that, where poverty's bad, doing this. I was gonna be a lot more nervous if she did that. So let's give her a kind of a midway point and try this out. That's kind of the start of the whole and why she was in
Gotcha.
it.
And you guys had spent time overseas previously, correct, for your job?
Yeah, we lived in, Bangkok for a work assignment back in the earlier '90s, '93, '94. Caitlin was 6 months old when we moved over, just to put it in perspective, and, I don't think either of her sets of grandparents were real happy that we were taking their first, grandchild from us over there. You probably understand, Alex, but,
Yes.
I mean, the reality of it is it was, and I'll be honest, I grew up in North Carolina. It was very rural where I grew up, went to NC State, but, I had only been to Canada before that as far as leaving the country, and we just took a big chance, and I was excited to go, and it was one of the best decisions we ever made. It changed a lot of things for us. One, obviously, we love to travel these days. I've been fortunate to go a lot of places, but when you can go to other countries and experience how they live, their cultures, it really, I think it's a, I think there's a saying about how it is basically the medicine against racism and these kind of things, because you need to
Yes.
understand and be part of it. And I loved it. They actually wanted me to stay 3 more years, but it is hot in Bangkok year round.
it,
And
it is it is
it
hot.
yeah, and the reality is we wanted to expand our family, and we were just uncomfortable trying to do all that remotely. No family anywhere close. So,
Yes.
but yeah, we did that, and we've traveled quite a bit. I mean, we love to travel.
So
And when
so
you
one thing that I left out in my intro of your illustrious career, which I want to pivot to now, is um, you're an author, a published author as well. And I'll read the title of the book that you authored, Antiguan Justice, A Father's Fight. And maybe now we can pivot to what drove you to add author to your sort of
yeah.
resume of things that you've accomplished.
Yeah, so I'll just give you the highlight, and then we can dig in as deep as you want. But as my daughter, she was in a 3-year um, tri-semester program at school in Antigua, and she acclimated quick. She did well. I was really happy with how things were going. In her second year, at the beginning of her second year, she ended up meeting a UK police officer uh, online. They end up chatting a lot, messaging, I should say, and decided they would go out. So they go to, but Antigua's a big boating island. I mean, big time boats, and so they do really nice stuff in the boating space. And so they went to that, and it's very nice. But the thing about Antigua is once it gets dark, I mean, there's not a lot to do really. I mean, it's not a big populated island. It's not. There's just not that much to do. And they ended up going back to her apartment, which was literally a mile from the area where the show was, just to hang out. She's got a balcony that overlooks the harbor. It was fabulous until the mosquitoes start to bite, which is what happened. They ended up going in. We're going to watch a movie. She went back to change because she was dressed up kind of nice for the boating thing, but then she put sweatpants and long t-shirt on. And basically, when she did that, he spiked her drink, and so he spiked her drink. Um, and well, I'll just tell you when she immediately said, "This doesn't taste right." He said, "Oh, I put some vodka in it. We do that in the UK all the time," which was just not true, but that's what he told her, and she didn't know. And so she took one more sip and said, "I'm not drinking that." So it was 2 sips is all it took, and in a 10, 15 minutes, she was passed out and didn't wake up until the morning. So that's what started all this. He raped her, and she didn't know what happened though. And she was a virgin at the time. She was saving herself. As old school as that sounds, that was Caitlin. And she didn't really know what happened. And of course, he's making up stories from the get go. He was on the island with his family for friend's wedding, and he had about 3 days left to get off the island. And so he just continued to feed whatever need Caitlin had about answering questions, make up whatever he needed to, just to stall long enough to get off the island. But by the second, the third day, bruising had really shown. She was in a lot of pain in the vaginal region, and she knew something wasn't right. And I think, and she and I've talked a lot about this. She says, you're always suspicious, but and also you don't want it to be true. And she had nothing to necessarily validate it at the time until the bruising and everything else manifested a little more. And so, literally, as the guy's about to get on the plane, he admits it after denying it multiple times in text messages. And so, basically, she was at school and she found out when he admitted it, and she came home, called my wife. We Skyped all the time. She got on a Skype with my wife and told her, and then my wife called me back to tell me, and then that's when everything started. And I'll end with this, and then you can ask me any detail you want within the beginning and end. 4 years to the date of the crime, he was found guilty. It was eerie that it was 4 years to the date it happened. I didn't even know it was 4 years to the date until the police officer at his court came in that morning and reminded us. So, but it was the worst 4 years of my life by far, and created just a trauma. This was trauma central. It just was. It was just brutal. Um, so whatever level of detail you'd like for me to get into, I'm happy to do it, or I'll let you guys drive the questions around it. But that's basically what the book's about. Let me just say this about the book. Caitlin, and my whole plan. Well, I had never planned to write a book, and if you ask my 12th grade English teacher, she'd say this guy will never write a book. It was not what I intended to do. But the reality is this: once I got engaged, which was early, I became Caitlin's advocate. I needed her to focus on school and getting help. And the deal we made, because I said I kind of wanted her to come home, to be honest. And we asked her, and for Jill and I as parents, we debated, what should we do? We don't know what to do. Should we leave her? Should we say, you should need to come home? So finally, I said, well, let's just ask her. So we called, and I said, Caitlin, how are you doing? This was how every call started. And I said, look, what do you want to do? If you want to come home, I'll come down there in the next 2 days and pack you up, and we'll come home. If you want to stay, I'll get you all the help we can get, for mental support and all the things we could do to help her. We'll make more trips down, whatever we need to do. And her response to that was, but what are we going to do about this guy? That was her first response. She said, he's going to just go do this to the next person. And I said, yep, I'm pretty sure you weren't the first too, because it was too well planned out. But anyway, um, and she basically said, he's taken a lot from me, because all of a sudden that travel nursing, she had no interest to go do it. It just crushed all of the things she was down there for. But she said, I would like to finish my degree here. And I need something that I can say I did there after this happened, and that kind of attitude, which I was proud of. I was nervous about it, to be honest. But and I said, well, look, if you will focus on those things, so getting the support you need from any kind of therapy we could do, which there was almost nothing down there. I'll take care of the pursuing justice. And so she had to write letters to the Antiguan and to the UK police that I would be the advocate, and then it was on, and it was way more than I realized I was going to be dealing with, to be honest, because I didn't know, but I would do it no matter what. It was just, I just needed to take off whatever was on her I wanted to take off. I took off. And so, it was, the grind started at that point. I will say this, that was after Jill had been down there. She went down as soon as we could get her a flight down. She was there. And because this is important to the whole picture, I'm just going to tell you a couple things real quick. When she called us that night, we said, "Go to the hospital and call the police. Go get a rape exam, call the police," which she did. It was pretty late at night, about 10:30, probably her time. Um, the policeman, the head of the sexual assault division, met her at the hospital and listened to her story. First took her to a room where there's not a lot of nobody around and listened to her story, and then proceeded to tell her that, she couldn't get a rape exam at that hospital. And it's, and of course, for those that don't know, listen, it's not easy to get a victim to get a rape exam. It's a traumatic event in itself. But here's Caitlin wanting to get her exam, and she's turned away. It's the biggest no-no of all of it. But here's why. Antigua is not a large island. It's 19 miles north to south, 14 miles east to west. And the school and where she lived was in the south. The hospital was in the north. It's about 20 to 25-minute drive, especially at night. There's not many cars on the road. And they have across the island little communities. And she lived in the Alberta community, and there's a health clinic there. And he said, "We're set up where you go to the clinic near where you live." And she said, "Well, I'm not going to that clinic for two reasons. One, I'm a nursing student and I work in that clinic. And there's no way I'm going where I know everybody there. I'm just not going to do it. And two, it's 10:30 at night. The clinic closes at 4. I mean, it's kind of embarrassing, but that's the situation. And then Jill gets down there. He did tell her he would get back to her on another place to take the rape exam. That was a Wednesday night. Jill gets there Saturday because, frankly, it's as quick as we could get her there. It wasn't that easy to get. It's not that easy to get to Antigua from here, particularly in the off season. We got her down there Monday morning. Monday was the second worst day of probably the whole thing. Um, the first thing to do is call the Detective Hope to try to see, hey, can we do this exam? I mean, Caitlin's in a lot of pain at this point. It had gotten really bad. And ultimately, she had infections, which so that just gets worse and worse by the minute. So they left a voicemail. Then Jill calls the consulate because we don't know what to do. I mean, we've traveled, but we have never dealt with international stuff from a legal perspective. And she says, calls the consulate, the embassies in Barbados, and says, "Look, here's what's happened. Can you give us some advice? What do you suggest we do?" The advice was to not call the embassy, not to call the embassy. And Jill's challenging. I mean, aren't they here to help us? I mean, we need help. We don't live here. Our daughter's here. Anyway, we took the advice. Turned out to be good advice. Um, and right after that call, Detective Hope called him back, wanted them to come meet him in an office about a mile from where Caitlin lived. In that meeting, and this is the last part of this, I just wanted to point out because it's just critical to everything else. Um, she has to tell the story again. This is still not the formal, you know, um, piece. This is just telling the same thing she told to the same person a few nights earlier, which is, of course, something you don't do. And then Jill was getting pretty annoyed because it felt like we're just moving at a snail's pace. And she just challenged her, "Look, we need to get on then. We need to start doing something. My daughter's been drugged and raped, and we need to do something. At least start doing something." And he basically said, with Caitlin and Jill right there, um, "Nothing's going to come of this. We don't extradite in Antigua." When I heard it that night, that's what I heard. About lost my mind. I mean, and I mean, it's right off we say go call the police, right? So right off we're law and order kind of family. That's how we are. It's how I've always been. So we're trying to do all this the right way, and then you're told that. And honestly, even if that were the case, he thought it was the case. Even if it were the case, that's not when you tell them. Do your investigation. The guy might show back up on the island. He's from the UK. The island was, you know, the UK on that island until 1981. I mean, they were the one that colonized it. So a lot of visitors from the UK. But that's what he said, and then I heard it, and I literally was up almost all night researching. I found out there is an extradition treaty. Um, and I read all the laws associated with it, and I thought, okay, because I was kind of hopeless at that point. I had a big breakdown, But then I saw that and I read it and I said, "Okay," I cross-referenced everything. I said, "This applies. It's not hopeless." And that's when I really dug in and said, "Okay." Honestly, I was just, like, out loud in my house by myself downstairs. I'm basically like, "F it. Imma have to drive this myself." And that's when it started, and it was a pretty
Wow.
relentless battle.
Well, thank you so much, Derek, for saying your story and also the story of Caitlin's. And I just wanted to say I'm so sorry for everything that Caitlin and your family went through. It's insane, so devastating. And I just want to go back to what you were saying about the officer saying that we don't extradite
Mhm.
with crimes. And you said you felt like you were almost lost your mind in that moment. How do you think in that moment? Because I know Alex has also talked about this in the past when he first got the news
Mhm.
about Chessie, that it was kind of all about just pure anger and kind of focus on yourself rather than Caitlin or your daughter. And for you, how do you feel that you're able to maybe channel your own emotions and kind of shift that into wanting to help your daughter and helping her feel as supported and kind of like other people were there for her as possible?
That's a great question, Gabriel, and here's exactly how that went down, and I can remember it like it was yesterday. So when Jill calls me back, Caitlin had told her, and then she opens the bedroom door. They were talking, and she says, "Can you come back?" So I go back, and immediately, as soon as the door was shut, my other two daughters were in the family room where I was. So we know they're out there. They're wondering what the heck's going on. And she said immediately, she said Caitlin was raped, and my first thing was, "Do we know who it was? Do we know who did it?" And she said it was a police officer from the UK, and I was a little puzzled by it, but my first response was, "I'll kill the SOB." That's what I said out loud. That's what I meant. That's what I said. But Jill said, "Caitlin's gonna call us back in the next 2 minutes probably." And I said, "Okay." And I literally, after I said that, I started getting my mind on Caitlin. And I hadn't had any of this training. This was just, I mean, we're a tight family. I was worried about her. I mean, I knew this was gonna be devastating to her. She was 22 years old, and she was still a virgin, and she was saving herself, and I knew, this was just gonna be devastating, so I had to really get my mind right. In fact, this is kinda difficult, but right before she called back via Skype to talk, she texted me. And her text, basically, she basically told me she was sorry she didn't do the things we told her to do, like invite a stranger into your house that you didn't know better and leave your drink alone. And that hurt. Mm, Still kind of hurts, to be honest. But soon as we got on the phone, I said, "Caitlin, I got your text. First of all, I just want to say, you know, it doesn't matter what you did, like those things. Those are just things you can do that might give you better odds to be safe. But it's not your fault. He's the one that did it." And I went into that mode because I knew I was just very empathetic because it was my daughter and we were very close, and I knew she was going to be in pain. And I mean, as much as we all were, you kind of erratic. At least I was, but I found a spot to just get calm, and I needed to be calm to talk to her. She knows me well enough to know I'm not gonna be calm for long, but it's not gonna be upset with her, and I wasn't upset with her at all. You know, we talk about all these things you can do to keep yourself safe, but those are, when somebody's got a plan, somebody's gonna drug you, they're just gonna find another opportunity. They could have been out and just went and got, a drink somewhere or whatever, and he could have done it, and then I mean, this was his plan, right? So, but from that point on, we just again, "What do you need?" So we got immediately flew Jill down there. We were doing everything we could to try to give her comfort. We called Rain immediately. Jill did. I did not. Rain was looking for support down there. My wife spent a day trying to find support, and we really went into big time support. And I will tell you that through the process, um, I mean, don't get me wrong. She saw me angry. She knew where the anger was going towards, and it wasn't her. She wanted justice as bad as I did, is the reality of it. So I really, and I never had any training on any of this stuff, but this was just about compassion for my daughter and trying to keep her calm and let her know it's going to be okay and let her know I'll take care of it. I don't want you to worry about it. And, it's those are big words when you don't really know what's going to happen. But I was pretty well committed to something happening, you know.
Oh my gosh, Derek. Um, I listening to that, the amount of regard and respect, I have for you and Jill as parents, the amount of admiration I have for your daughter, and that probably extends to your daughters.
Mhm.
Um, what you did unknowingly was textbook trauma response. What victims need to hear when they disclose. And you said repeatedly, I didn't know what the heck I was doing. That's the way Susan and I felt. There was no playbook to fall
Yeah.
back to, but you fell back to what I would describe as the unconditional love
Uh-huh.
parents have for their kids. And somehow you were able to access that at a very traumatic point of time.
Yeah.
And I want to dive into that a little bit because it's a topic that we've talked about on our podcast. We talk about it at schools when we do workshops to young people to talk about who they feel they are at their core and how do you gain the sort of practice to build a muscle memory to say, okay, if you identify as this loving, compassionate, supportive person, how do you access that in a moment of trauma,
Mhm.
in a moment of stress, right? And because in your book you talk in terms of the traditional roles of that men have and
Mhm.
dads have as protectors of their family, right? And you had the same knee-jerk reaction that I had, which was, I'm going to kill him,
Yep.
right? Um, and but talk to me about if you can even describe it, right? Because you said you took a moment, right, before speaking to Caitlin.
Yeah.
But I think that moment, because I've spoken to so many fathers of survivors,
Mhm.
and it's a universal response, right? Of rage and anger, and then a feeling of revenge and violence, right, towards the perpetrator,
Mhm.
um, which is absolutely counterproductive to the well-being of the survivor, right?
Yeah.
Um, Tell me, how do you access this well of compassion? And then what was it like trying to continue to stay focused on that versus falling victim to the darker side?
Um, Instinctively just knowing, like I said, I mean, by the time from the time I heard to the time Caitlin called us was literally 2 to 3 minutes. And I mean, for sure, 3/4 of that time, I'm sure I was red. I'm sure I mean, I was loud. I mean, it's just anger from just an unexpected, horrible thing. But when Jill reminded me Caitlin's getting ready to call, I took some deep breaths. I just started focusing on Caitlin, what she's been through, what she's gonna need. And I didn't know any of this stuff. I just wanted to make sure I could do all I could for my daughter because I was worried about her. And it makes it even worse, is probably not too different, Alex, from your situation, but it's not. I can't just drive to Antigua. It takes it takes a little bit of time to get there from Knoxville. So I wanted to comfort her as much as I could, um, and and it stayed that way, and I don't think other unless Caitlin brought up, and she did a few times, about what are we gonna do, and she was worried about it, and, you know, I felt when she said those things, she gave me a little bit of permission to be a little bit, different. So, at least that was my assumption, and that's how it was. She knew how I felt. She knew how I felt about it. I just didn't want her to see it too much. She knew I was passionate about it. I was not going to give up. I'm a mild mannered person normally. I can be a bulldog, for sure, and that's what I was. I was not going to let go of it until something was resolved one way or the other. That's how I felt about it. But every time we talked to Caitlin, it was. it was different. What do you need? Do we, I mean, what we did for her, um, she wanted to stay in school, as I mentioned. She was coming home in between each semester. That's 3 times a year. We went down every spring break, all my other daughters as well. So we saw her 4 times a year. Not bad, but we knew we needed more. So Jill and I both took separate trips down a year. So we got at least 6 times a year in there. It's, and you're flying, you're doing all these things. It's not the easiest. And she also, within, I'll say 3 weeks, I don't remember exactly when, she called me one day and said, Can I move? This happened in her apartment. And I said, as soon as you can find a place you're comfortable with, you can move. I'll deal with the rest of it. You don't have to worry about anything. Just find a place, because it's a little hard for me to do. And I think I probably asked if she wanted me to come. She said, no, I think I can do it. And within 2 weeks, she found a place. She was going to have a roommate. It was a less safe area, I would say, of the island, but she was going to have a roommate, and it seemed better. For about a year, she stayed there until her car got stolen one night. And I'm gonna tell you, she had PTSD. She had a lot of issues. She was doing well in school though. She was wanting to be there, but that put her over the edge when her car got stolen. So, and right after that, she said, this the apartment's gone downhill a bit. Can I move again? And I'm like, sure. So I said, let's find a place. So she was down there for 3 years. So that first year in one place, next year in another place. And I'll tell you, when we would visit at spring break, we stayed in Jolly Harbor, which is a very nice gated townhomes on the fingers on the water. Very nice. You're right at the beach. And I started thinking about where I could find a place for that was decent. And we ended up finding, I negotiated with the owner of one of the places where we stayed on vacation. And she basically got a 2-bedroom townhome to live in for her last year. But they had gates and guards and a grocery store right in that, and a couple of restaurants. And you know what? I told Jill, it's just gonna not be cheap, but we're gonna do it because I want her to be safe. And frankly, I feel better. I'd rather worry about the money than worry about her, right? So we did that for a year. She stayed there, and so you just do anything we could for her. We did. If we could do it, we did it, and that's just how it went. The whole thing I will say is I made a deal with her, about taking this on, and really with the rest of my family also, because, and I will tell you, for 9 months, this was a second job. I mean, I worked hard in my job, and I worked before my job started. I worked at lunchtime if I could respond to something, because Antigua's an hour ahead half the year. Let me respond, and after work, I set up everything for the next day, and this went on for 9 months. It went on until the first extradition request was made, because now I've got to a hump, right? And that's the kind of stuff you do. Anytime she wanted to talk, she called, we talked. It didn't matter. It didn't matter. I could have been in the middle of anything. I would have stopped. It's just how it was.
Mhm.
Over those 4 years since until justice was given, but obviously there's no real justice for a crime like that. Do you think that your support changed? I know you talked about how it was just kind of constant support, but until that justice was actually given, and when that justice was given, how did you feel about it? Because clearly there is no real justice that can be served for such a crime like that. And when that like criminal sentence was given out, how did your daughter feel about that? And how are you there to still support her through such an experience like that?
Yeah. Well, I'll start off by saying during this period, and I agreed to take this stuff on. My agreement with the family was every time there's an update, I will update you. So, and at least once a month, sometimes there was nothing. I said, just want you to know I hadn't forgot. There's just nothing new that happens, right? It was really drawn out. Now let me say, because as I mentioned, and this whole thing was historical because there's never been an extradition to a westernized country, not just in Antigua, but anywhere in the Eastern Caribbean. There's one case, and it's Caitlin's case. And this is why it took so long. It was, look, I don't, I don't want to say it necessarily bad, but I criticize Antigua a little bit, right, in the book and when I do podcasts and stuff, because they made mistakes. But I give them a lot more credit than I do criticism, because they could have let this die. And then it'd have been a whole nother situation. They stuck in there with me, and they did it, and I was persistent. Uh, I could tell you quotes that some of the people down there told me when it was over, but I stayed on it because, I was worried, I was scared that it was going down the vine. I was really scared. I was talking to the UK police all the time, Antigua police all the time, and it was almost one-way calls. I think I had 130 calls to Antigua. I think I got 5. 130 emails, 76 calls. I think that's what it was. Anyway, that's kind of how all that went. Now, when it came to justice, I think this is kind of important because the UK police, I called them the day Jill flew to Antigua, a couple of days after we found out. I was working for a UK company at the time, and so I had friends over there. And one of them I knew had worked for the police, not Metro London like this guy, but he understood the process and things. And so we talked on the Sunday, and I told him what happened. I needed advice, what to do. And he told me how to call a non-emergency number because I wanted to get the guy on their radar. I was 100% confident he'd done this before. He's a police officer. Nothing worse than a bad officer because it's a wolf in sheep's clothing. So that Monday, I called and filed a report on him, a misconduct report. That's all I could really do since the crime didn't happen in England. So that started. And I started communicating with the UK pretty regular. For a while, I was a little bit of the intermediary between Antigua and the UK because they were just Interpol. They were having troubles, and I just was connecting everybody I could connect to make this thing happen. It took a toll. I want to just tell you this part when it comes to what the expectations were. When I first asked Caitlin, what would she be okay with? Her first response was, he can't be a policeman anymore. That's where she was because that's what got her. That's why she let him in her house. Because when I actually later asked her, why do you think you did those things? She said, because he was police, I thought you could trust policemen. You know, I mean, I couldn't really say a lot other than I guess you can't trust anybody. Um, so, that's where she started. The UK police officer that stayed on this case for 4 years and was at the trial with us asked me that question when I first met him in London. And I said, well, Sergeant Linton, this is what Caitlin first said. And I told him about not being a police officer. And I could see he was like, okay, okay. And I said, yeah, but that's not going to satisfy me. I just want you to know that is not going to be an acceptable solution to this thing. And I'm not sure it will be for Caitlin for long. This is just the cop thing got her to her. And it didn't take long for Caitlin to have a whole different perspective of what she wanted to be in justice. So everybody was trying to reduce my expectations because I expected justice and I was going to fight to the dang death for justice. That's how I felt. And everybody was trying to lower it. And honestly, I looked at all the statistics, like I'm sure Alex, you guys did when all this is happening. And you see in 2015, near the same timetable, maybe a year later, the stats for a perpetrator of sexual assault going to prison was 0.6 of 1%. And then you
Oh
kind of
my,
feel defeated, right?
yep. Oh my gosh, Derrick, I just connected the dots in terms of the time frame.
Yeah,
That,
yeah.
um, you said something earlier that I want to drive into now because
Okay.
it's something that I found myself doing. I look at our lives now in terms of my development as pre my daughter's assault, when I was ignorant, when I did not even was not even aware of all the privileges that I had as a white male.
Mhm.
Um, and then the post assault when I saw how the real world works. And you said this quote when you had given different advice to your daughter. You said there are better odds to be safe, right? If she did these
Mhm.
things, as
Yeah.
dads, we want to protect our daughters, right? And I want to lift this lens from this micro topic of what happened to your daughter, what happened to my daughter, but lift it up to a more micro level and discussion, right? Because both our daughters spoke up for the same reason. They did not want the perp to do it again, which is
Yeah.
such a freaking noble, response, right?
Yeah.
And I think I'm assuming, and tell me if I'm wrong, but it activated something inside of me, right? To say, oh my gosh, that is, because first you're wondering, is the gravitational pull is telling you to be silent, right? Wouldn't it be better that you just move on from this? I'm sure you heard that a lot from everyone. Just focus on your daughter, et cetera, et cetera. Um,
A little bit. A little bit.
so, you know, but then Me Too exploded several years later. And then we had, this sort of procession of men standing in front of cameras with microphones shoved in their face who are saying, I have a daughter, right? I have a friend who's a woman. Um, my mother is a woman, right? I mean, just these
Yeah.
bizarre, bizarre statements that men felt the need to articulate that, they had some regard, for women.
Mhm.
And, granted, we're both fathers of three girls. We've been blessed, in that way. But I sort of sit here now and say, listen, all of the structures, all of the laws, all of these tools, right? When the detective said um, that we don't extradite, right? That's a structural, statement that
Mhm.
was somehow intentionally built and trained into his mind, right? And you would think someone who dedicates their life to law enforcement, right, would and has empathy towards other people and has a mother, has an aunt, has a grandmother, right?
Yeah.
Might have a daughter. Um, that you would be more focused on, oh my gosh, look at these injustices that are happening, and we need to speak up and fight, right?
Mhm.
Referring to the title of your book, we need to change laws, not just help support a survivor. We need to provide training in our schools to our police officers. We need to have ways to hold people accountable. We need to look at what's causing these outbreaks of sexual violence that
Mhm.
is an epidemic, in all of our societies. It's a universal, phenomena, right? And you highlighted that conviction rate, which is ridiculous. And, that alone would say we need to update our medieval level laws, right, when it comes to violence against women or violence against anyone who is um, um, not part of the mainstream, quote unquote, mainstream culture.
Mhm. Exactly. I will say this. Yeah, it started off rough. Once I want to say once I got to Commissioner Robinson, who's over the highest level police person, he was a very intelligent, empathetic man. He probably saved my life. He he understood. He got it. He got it, and he pushed forward on the extradition to the attorney general and so on. Not to get caught up on that and take too much time, but I will say he really was a good man trying to help a father, knowing that we're trying to do something to get justice for my daughter. That was that was huge to me. I still keep in touch with him. Um, but as you go down the road, I held on to a lot of anger. I had dual personalities there for a long time because I tried to show my anger when mostly I'm by myself or something, and my wife probably saw more than anybody else. But the reality is, until it's resolved, you've got all this pent up emotion. We're not talking to people about it. My mother, my brother, nobody knew about it in my family until it was over. And I just wanted to say this part about it to finish the whole case thing. And then when we finally got him extradited, which took 3 years and 4 months of pain, grinding, calling people, doing all these things. Um, all that time, everybody was saying, trying to change my expectations, but then he was found guilty. And this goes back to the judicial stuff. So we're coming home from the trial. And I will tell you, you asked this, Gabriel. Let me just tell you, when we got out of that trial, of course, we're hugging and all this when the verdict's read. And I put this stuff in my book. I did not hold back in my book about anything about how I felt or anything, but we got out in the corridor, and I told my wife, I need to go outside. And I got outside and I just got down on a knee and I just let it all out. And it was unlike any feeling I've ever had in my life because I could feel stuff rushing through my veins. It was out of this world kind of feeling. And it was just all that pent up stuff for 4 years, because this is 4 years later. And because you don't get justice. Now on 6 weeks later we have the sentencing, and we get to Skype in, so I don't need to fly down there for an hour and a half meeting. So the law, I just want to say this when we talk about the law, is actually 20 years to life is the what's in the this Sexual Offenses Act. And you know, and to me, I mean, I'm no lawyer, but so 20 years to life, the judge has got a lot of flexibility in that time, especially for a 22-year-old predator, right? He's going to be around a while. And I'm thinking it should be at least 20 years. That's the minimum, but probably should be more of 25 to 30 based on the damage she had and all the stuff that went with it. And then he gets a 15-year sentence, which, to be honest, a lot more than folks around here tend to get for some reason, but we still weren't happy with it. This is what we talked about at the very beginning. Caitlin was the first one, and CNN was at our house. Caitlin Gate told me on the way back from Antigua, I'm giving up my anonymity. I'm going to speak out on this because I didn't do anything wrong, and I'm not going to carry that burden with me. So CNN was at our house. They sat and watched the sentencing with us and did interviews and all that stuff, but Caitlin was the first one to say, "That's just not enough." It's just not enough. And then, anyway, that's because it's just, I don't understand what we're doing when it comes to this crime and punishment. I don't understand it. Why do we have laws if we're not going to follow them? I mean, we all use this example of the Stanford swimmer, and this came up even in our trial when they read letters that people sent. Here was what I said. This is what I told them. I did my victim statement. They let us read them, but I'm like, he might have been a good kid. I don't know. All I know is it doesn't matter what he did before. When he committed this crime, this is the crime, and here's the sentencing for it. I don't understand why we're going outside of that. Right? That's how. Otherwise, change your laws. Right? I mean, I just don't get it. It makes no sense. And so for people that have go through stuff like this, all we know are what's in the laws. I mean, you can look it up and read it, and it certainly sets the wrong expectation, I can tell you that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I just want to go back to what you're talking about with silence and kind of that pent up anger,
Yeah.
because I feel like, especially me and as a young man, I feel like I'll feel a lot of things, but often people don't have kind of those valves or other people to talk to. So when they're in kind of as one, just solo, and when all everything's just pent up inside of you, it kind of goes all up into just bursts out instead of having those people to talk to. And I feel
Yeah.
like for survivors, that's also often the case. When they open up and they disclose what they went through, people at first they seem like, oh, I'm there for you. But when some things actually disclose, then people just back away. And then everything that they had is just met with silence. So I would
Yeah.
say to you, with masculinity today, do you still see that same kind of narrative and culture of it all being built up inside and just kind of this culture of silence as well? Or have you seen now, recently, 2026, last year, having the culture being more shifted towards more embracing and people being there for other people and kind of fighting those perpetrators and actually being there and meeting them with help and support rather than being met with silence when you're disclosing something.
Yeah. Just quickly, I'll say in my case, I talked to a lawyer in the UK and I talked to a lawyer in Antigua, and they both were very convincing that we should not be talking about it because we're doing something that hadn't been done much. The UK press, you guys may know, is ruthless. And believe me, there's a lot in the UK paper on this. If you put that perpetrator's name in there, you'll see anytime somebody sneezed, it's in there. But they didn't know her name was not out. Our family's name was not out. So there was nothing in the US or anything. And the fact that they said, don't let this get out because it's going to be hard as it is. We were not about to be the ones to screw it up. That's just how we felt. So we locked it down. Unhealthy is probably the most unhealthy thing you can do. Don't do that. It was we didn't know any better. I know a lot better now. And so we were silent by nobody because nobody knew. And so there was nobody to talk to. We talked to each other, and that's not enough. And I didn't, get connected with one father in a parent group, a Facebook private parent group. And so he and I had a number of conversations. He was dealing with similar but different circumstances with his daughter in college. And, you know, that's how we got into it. As I learned more, I'll just kind of take you forward where I really started to understand this. Um, we all had some trauma. I'll just say quickly that my wife and myself and Caitlin all went through trauma therapy, a very specific methodology, and it made a huge difference. I couldn't talk like this about it, a year after almost until I got some therapy that really helped me get a lot of it out because it's just pent up energy is what it is. A lot of this therapy is talking it out until you take the energy out of it. And then you can talk about it. And so most of the time I'm pretty good. Once in a while I'm not, but in the end, we need to talk about it. There's no question about it. I think probably science and other things would validate that. I can just tell you from my own personal therapy, it is how it works. You have to talk about it. I also think that men do not talk about things much historically. So Gabriel, I'm counting on your generation to really be I'm serious. I joke about it a little bit, but I'm serious because as young people, you have the chance to change how this can go forward. It's and I was talking to a friend of mine. I'll just tell you, I had a pull, right? Alex talks about a pull about 2021, 2022. I was still working in my career field. I'd written the book. I was waiting for everything to finish to release it. I knew I was going to get involved, and it was just a timing issue for me. And so as soon as I got the book out, which was in June of 22, I think, I knew that 23 would be my last year working in my career, and I just, you know, left and didn't look back. And I just jumped into this. Then I got the trauma therapy. Then I actually got so fascinated by it, I went and took training on trauma informed approach. This was when I really knew, hey, I did some decent stuff. I really didn't know. I really didn't know. And so I got all that training. And I will just tell you this, and I realized my first thought was, boy, Antigua needs this because they did not do this very well. So in December 2024, I flew to Antigua and did a training for first responders on the trauma informed approach, and probably will be going back. And but it's just stuff we don't learn. We're not taught, but it's so important because this is just sexual assaults we're talking about. It's domestic violence. It's just on and on, right? And all of those create trauma. And what all these things about dealing with victims, it's really dealing with trauma. And it could be domestic violence or sexual assault or any of those kinds of things. They're different and they are going to have some differences to them, but in the end, you have to be able to communicate about them. That's what it comes down to is communicate. And you need somebody that knows that you can depend on, be trustworthy. But men are they're not big on this historically. That's why I think the younger generation we really need them. And what I have the right to does going to high schools and middle schools. I think that's what's required. And Alex obviously knows James Smith Williams well. He and I became friends a while back. We both went to NC State, and he and I were talking about this one day. And I said, I'm trying to inform people on all these tools you can use to keep yourself safe. And we got to talking about it, and he's like, yeah, we need to think of he's like, what, 25, 26 years old, way younger than me. And he says, yeah, he says, I realize though, what we really need to do is get the men to stop doing it. And it just, the biggest light bulb, I was almost embarrassed because it's such a big light bulb went off, like that would solve a lot more problems than trying to use tools to keep yourself safe. I mean, you're never going to stop it, But if we can get men, boys and men, because if you're in high school, I'll say a young man, um, it happens a lot in high schools. If we can get them to stop acting this way, right, then we don't have to worry so much about the tools. Yeah, they're good to still have maybe, but we can reduce it. And my whole goal and everything I do is, look, I don't really have a job. I just do stuff in this space, and it's 100% just to try to
I'm going to
reduce
interrupt. I'm going to
things.
interrupt you on
Yeah.
that one, Derek. You've got the most important damn job in the world right now. And Derek, I heard such wonderful things about your recent in speaking engagement up in the Boston area, speaking to students, doing a workshop for I Have the Right To. And I'm so grateful for your dedication to this topic because right now, I do agree with you. It is going to be up to Gabriel and other fine young men to sort of speak up, but they need mentors. They need
Right.
examples. They need role models out there who are not afraid to use their voice because unfortunately there's an epidemic of disconnection, of loneliness, of isolation of our young men, our boys, whether it's through social media, whether it's through how busy double income parental lives are, single, family households, um, and the influence of the Andrew Tates of the world, et cetera. And, having unbelievable people like, James, a former NFL player, like you, Derek, like others speaking out and letting our kids, there's a different path to follow.
Right.
And then I will take it a step further. These men who are doing the work now are inspired by unbelievably brave women who've come
Yeah.
forward and spoken up, like your daughter, like
Yeah.
Annie Clark, who helped, your family,
Yeah.
like so many survivors that inspired us. And Chessie, who's taught me, so much that, and you said something so profound that I want to sort of end our podcast on and leave it out there in the universe. And maybe this becomes the working title of this podcast is your quote, "He saved my life," referring to that one officer in the UK. And it is simple things like a listening ear, like empathy, like someone who is willing to care, um, that makes the difference. It isn't someone who does something big and fancy. It's doing the simple damn things that all of us have within our power to do,
Yeah.
which is to connect, right? And Derek, I applaud you for not only connecting with your family, your daughter, now with the broader survivor community and spreading out to speak to young men. You and I have that same damn epiphany, right? Yes,
Yeah.
let's teach our boys how to be the men that they're meant to be,
That's
right?
right.
Yeah, and exactly, just going off of Alex, I think the same thing for me, Derek. I think a lesson and just an important thing for everyone to take away from it is what you said, Derek. What thing really stuck with me? Just talk about it, and especially the word it. It doesn't have to be some massive thing. It doesn't have to be the world's gonna end. It's just that thing. It can be however small, however big, but just the fact that you're talking about it. And once you talk about it, then it can expand into other things and other things. And it's just that starting moment, it's starting that conversation. And then once that conversation starts, then it can develop into so many more things. And that's how advocacy and real things can actually spread is by having that first starting conversation. But you don't have to start with something big. People don't have to be scared by maybe starting at some large topic that might seem daunting to some people. All it has to
Right.
start out with is a small conversation. That's how real change can really happen. So I just want to say thank you so much, Derek, for your story and for sharing Caitlin's story. And I think this is a very, very powerful podcast.
Well, I appreciate you guys having me on. It's an important topic, and I'll be doing this as long as I can do it, which is doing anything I can to make this better for our young men and women.
Well, you've inspired me now to close this out with in a way that I've closed out a couple of episodes that have really inspired me, which is to put a challenge out there, right? Derek, we finally got to meet face to face last November after the GDS summit in Washington, D.C. And it felt like I was meeting, a forever friend. And that is the beautiful thing about this work that we do, because real connections are
Absolutely.
there, and they just so happen to be around this horrendous topic, right?
Right.
But the power of connection is something that just opens up life to its fullest potential, right? Where there's freedom of emotions, there's freedom of, things to engage in that are actually, you know, beneficial to how you look at life. And to me,
Yeah.
that's the miracle of trauma. And this is a message to survivors and families of survivors out there. There is beautiful things ahead of you, right?
Yeah.
The world might seem dark, you might seem lost, but there's so much beauty ahead if you open up yourself to connections.
Yeah.
And you will find that person where you will say, that person saved my life. That
Yeah.
connection, that ear saved my life. And I want to challenge men out there, right, to join us somehow. Check out our website, listen to these podcasts, share them with other men, send a note to us. We have a men's group that connects on a regular basis to talk about topics. We want to bring more men into this action because I think, Derrick, we've both seen this field is dominated by women.
It
The
is.
people that attend, sessions are women, right? It's very hard to get men activated into this conversation because men think this isn't a men's issue. And it is a men's issue because it is overwhelmingly 95% plus men who are perpetrating the violence. And then there's the whole entire male population that is standing on the sidelines, being silent, watching this damage being done. So,
Yeah.
do you have anything to say to the men out there, Derrick?
Actually, yeah, and I appreciate you just saying that part because it really gets my mind going. But I would say this, you can be a man and you can be a strong man for your family, for your friends. You can be a warrior. You can do those things. That's just half of you. You can do the other half, which is be compassionate, empathetic, listen, share. It's okay. You can have emotions. It's okay. It's actually healthy. Please. I mentioned I went to NC State, and I'll just tell you, I was there during the years of Jim Valvano. Saw him many times, talked to him briefly, just in passing almost. But when he passed away from cancer, you see this on ESPN all the time, where he said, "Don't give up. Don't ever get up. Give up." And that's how I thought about him saying that through the whole journey. But he said you need to use your emotions. You can cry, you can talk, you can do all these things. And I think about him when I think about this at this level because he was right. Now we just got to get more men to think this way because it actually is healthy and it's helpful and it's a better way of life.
Amen. Amen. Well, I think that's a wonderful note. Derrick, thank you so much for joining our podcast. To our listeners, find that person that's going to save your life. And the only way to do that is by connecting with others. And like you said, Derrick, being vulnerable. Gabriel, thank you for being who you are and being a leader in the space with young people to carry out this message to the world. I am just so grateful every day for the ability, to do this work. And I'm looking forward, to continuing to be out there and now being out there with you, Derrick, and having a friend to do it together with. And I'm grateful to the universe for putting us together. So thank you.
Me too. Thank you as well.
And thank
feel
you
the
so
same
much,
way.
Derrick.
Thank you so much for listening. Like and subscribe to the podcast on all platforms. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please give us a 5-star rating and tell your friends about Aspire. Follow us on social media at I Have the Right To. Learn more about our student and executive programming at our website at ihavetherightto.org.